Jeffrey Dahmer. From 1978 to 1991, Milwaukee became the center of an extremely disturbing criminal case involving Jeffrey Dahmer, a quiet and socially isolated man who lived alone in an apartment complex. Dahmer targeted young men, usually approaching them with friendly conversation and offering money for photos or drinks. His method relied on trust. He invited victims into his apartment under casual, harmless pretenses, and once they entered, they never returned. Dahmer sedated his victims before causing death by manual pressure to the throat or suffocation. Following the incidents, he would perform post-mortem dismemberment to dispose of remains, often preserving certain parts. Neighbors occasionally complained about strange smells, but Dahmer always provided believable excuses, and his calm demeanor prevented suspicion. Everything unraveled in July 1991 when a frightened man escaped Dahmer's apartment and alerted police. When officers entered the apartment, they found overwhelming evidence of long-term criminal activity. Dahmer was arrested immediately and later confessed. In 1992, he was convicted of 15 murders and sentenced to multiple life terms totaling more than 900 years. In 1994, Dahmer was killed by another inmate at Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Gary Ridgway. From 1982 to 1998, dozens of individuals went missing in King County, Washington, with many cases eventually linked to Gary Ridgway, a quiet truck painter who lived an unremarkable life. Ridgway primarily focused on individuals he met along highways and in public areas, gaining their trust before persuading them to relocate under false pretenses. Regarding his methodology, forensic analysis indicated that once in an isolated location, he would use physical force to neutralize his targets, often relying on his strength to overcome them quickly. He often returned to his daily routine immediately after carrying out these actions, which allowed him to avoid suspicion for years. The Green River investigation became one of the largest and longest-running investigative cases in U.S. history. Ridgway was interviewed multiple times by police but initially passed polygraph tests, which delayed his identification. Advances in DNA technology in the early 2000s finally connected him to forensic evidence collected decades earlier. In 2001, Ridgway was taken into custody at his workplace. To avoid the maximum sentence, he admitted responsibility for 49 fatalities, though investigators believe the true number may be higher. In 2003, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole and is currently held at the Washington State Penitentiary. Aileen Wuornos. From late 1989 to 1990, a series of murders along Florida highways led investigators to Aileen Wuornos, a homeless woman with a long history of abuse, instability, and survival-based street life. Aileen's method involved hitchhiking and targeting men who offered her rides. She typically chose remote highways and isolated areas where there were no witnesses. According to investigators, Aileen would enter a vehicle under the pretense of needing transportation and later confront the driver, often turning the encounter into a robbery that escalated into violence. Aileen utilized a firearm at close range to carry out her actions. Police found that fatal injuries were typically located in the upper torso, resulting in rapid internal failure. Police received their first real lead when victims' belongings appeared in pawn shops with Aileen's signature. Her fingerprints were already in the criminal database from earlier arrest records, making identification straightforward. She was arrested in January 1991 at a biker bar in Daytona Beach. Though she initially claimed self-defense, the evidence led to her conviction for multiple murders. Aileen Wuornos was executed in 2002 at Florida State Prison. Richard Ramirez. Between 1984 and 1985, residents of Los Angeles and San Francisco lived in fear of an unknown individual, later identified as Richard Ramirez, a drifter with a previous history of criminal activity. Ramirez carried out his actions at night, randomly targeting homes with unlocked doors or open windows, choosing individuals of different ages and genders to avoid creating a clear pattern. He would quietly enter houses while people were sleeping, and then initiate an encounter, often using objects he found inside the home. These incidents spread panic across California because there was no specific profile for those he targeted, and he moved frequently between cities. The case reached a breakthrough in 1985 when a survivor provided a partial description, and the media widely broadcast his face. After his vehicle was identified and linked to multiple crime scenes through fingerprint analysis, Ramirez was recognized by civilians in East Los Angeles. Before police could intervene, local residents pursued and restrained him until officers arrived. In 1989, Richard Ramirez was convicted of 13 fatalities and multiple other serious offenses. He was sentenced to the maximum penalty and remained at San Quentin State Prison until his death in 2013. John Wayne Gacy. Between 1972 and 1978, Chicago authorities investigated the disappearances of multiple teenage boys and young men, all eventually connected to John Wayne Gacy, a well-liked contractor who also performed as Pogo the Clown at children's events. Gacy's criminal pattern involved luring young men to his home by offering job opportunities, money, or construction work. He used his business reputation to create trust, making his victims less cautious. Once inside his home, Gacy took control of the situation, often leading victims to his basement, where he subdued his targets. His primary method was ligature strangulation. He used ropes or cloth to asphyxiate his victims, often incorporating restraint and torture elements, before their deaths. When police began linking missing persons to Gacy's property, they obtained a search warrant. Inside the house, investigators noticed unusual odors and discovered suspicious soil beneath the crawl space. A more thorough search revealed evidence connecting Gacy to dozens of disappearances. He was arrested in December 1978 and convicted of 33 murders. Gacy was executed at Stateville Correctional Center in 1994. Ted Bundy. Between 1974 and 1978, several young women began disappearing from college campuses and public places across multiple states, starting in Washington. The man responsible was Ted Bundy, a law student who appeared charming, polite, and completely harmless. Bundy's method was calculated. He would approach women in libraries, parks, or parking lots while pretending to be injured, sometimes using a fake arm cast or a sling, and ask for help carrying books or loading something into his tan Volkswagen Beetle. Once he gained their trust, he would lure them close to the vehicle and abduct them. His primary method of ending their lives was blunt force trauma combined with manual pressure to the neck. He would render his victims unconscious before the final act, with the cause of death for most being severe head injuries or asphyxiation. He frequently changed states to avoid patterns, moving from Washington to Oregon, then Utah, Colorado, and finally Florida. Bundy was first arrested in Utah during a traffic stop in 1975 after officers noticed suspicious tools in his car. Following multiple escapes and a dramatic chase across states, he was finally captured in Florida, where evidence linked him to more murders. After a highly publicized trial, he was sentenced to death and executed in 1989 at Florida State Prison. Dennis Rader, from 1974 to 1991, Wichita, Kansas lived in fear of a mysterious man who called himself BTK, an acronym he created based on his specific methodology of neutralizing his targets. Dennis Rader, the man behind the name, lived a seemingly ordinary life. He was a church council president, a husband, a father, and a local compliance officer. Rader's operations were highly organized. He carefully studied the families he monitored, watching their routines, learning their schedules, and planning his entries to ensure no witnesses were present. He followed a methodology he referred to as BTK, focusing on restricting his targets. He used ligature strangulation as his primary killing method, often employing ropes, plastic bags, or other materials to cause asphyxiation. After each crime, he sent taunting letters to police and the media, describing how he planned and carried out his actions. For years, the investigation went cold because Rader simply disappeared from public communication. In 2004, he resurfaced and sent a floppy disk to police, assuming it was untraceable. It was his biggest mistake. Metadata from the disk revealed that the file came from a computer at Rader's church. DNA and surveillance confirmed the connection, and he was arrested in 2005. Rader confessed and received 10 consecutive life sentences. He is currently imprisoned at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas.